Hi, everybody.
Welcome to episode 9 of MOMENTOUS Barely Logging in by the skin of our teeth. Wow, that was amazing. We overcame missed appointments and technical difficulties. I was static for half an hour. I don't know what was going on there. Again, broke the golden rule. Don't do software updates just before a mission critical operation.
So what did you update to?
Oh, it was just a camo, reincubate camo. They're doing one update after another, and you do that, then you've got to restart Microsoft Edge and all that stuff. Yes, Microsoft Edge, not Google Chrome.
I was going to do Big Sur, and I waited till tomorrow, or I'm going to wait till tomorrow.
I have a little bit of news about Big Sur, but I'll get into that in a moment.
Okay.
But first, happy meme day, everyone.
May the 4th. Have you seen Mark Hamill's his approach to this every year? He actually just retweeted an image of last year's, but he has something for each day. It's a little like an advent calendar all the way along.
Nice.
Well, speaking of advent calendars, I don't know about y'all. I know I'm much older than most of you. Back in the day, when we had advent calendars, we'd open the little door for each of the days, and behind that door was a picture, and we were happy.
It was simpler times.
And then the 90s and the 2000s come around, and these younger people in our lives, like younger siblings and like nieces and nephews and kids of friends, they got these fancy dancy advent calendars like the size of a bookcase, and they're filled with like chocolates, or like you can get beer ones. Like, what is this nonsense? We had pictures.
Are you actually get off my lawning us right now?
Yeah.
I'm yelling at a cloud.
Okay.
So happy meme day. And yes, May the 4th, Star Wars Day. We gotta love modern culture, but it provides so many opportunities for free PR for multinational corporations such as Disney. And they took the opportunity to blow our minds with none other than a real lightsaber. And according to The Verge, it looks extremely cool. Anyone want to jump in and comment on this?
I don't even know what to say. Like, because I mean, their regular lightsabers are like $200. So I have no idea. I have no idea what this is going to cost, but it looks amazing. It seems like a combination between like the FX sabers and the extensible sabers that they had in the past. This, from the image, this looks really legit. Like, it looks great.
Also, they released Leia's lightsaber as sort of an exclusive at Disneyland, and they are packaging it with I forget the name of it, but it's the redo or the refurb, I think maybe, of Luke's lightsaber from Rise of Skywalker, and they're packaging this Leia lightsaber and the refurb lightsaber. Doesn't pop up, 400 bones US.
Well, lots of middle-aged folks who can afford that kind of stuff will be fulfilling their childhood fantasies.
Do you know, I actually like this one better than some of those effects lightsabers and some of those other ones, because you basically like screw like a plastic tube, and if you want to carry it around, you gotta like have a sheath. It's like it just screams nerd. It screams compromise. This extending lightsaber is almost like that Optimus Prime we saw a couple weeks back, the one that auto transforms and moves around. Like, this is the contract that I wanted to make with the lightsaber makers. Like, it needs to look as real as possible. I wanted to do that. Having said that, to Gray's point, how much is this going to cost? If Optimus transforming costs $800, how much is this going to cost when one that doesn't move costs $200 or $300?
Well, whatever it costs, can we all agree that that will be the first and last time anyone utters the word sheath on this program?
Ooh, heavens.
Well, so back in my day, again, rant time, old man rant time. I think it was in grade 2. I was at my friend Andy's birthday party, and this was deluxe party, Italian family, all out, the kind with coins in the cake, you know, like crunch. Oh yeah, nickel, cool. And he got from his parents like a 1978, 1979 grade lightsaber at the time. And can you imagine what that was?
Was it just a traffic wand? It was just a traffic wand, wasn't it?
Not far off. It was a long plastic sword that was just basically glow in the dark.
Yeah.
And we were happy.
Well, those things, along with a Spock helmet, I think were really sort of the iconic toys of the 70s.
Like the hair helmet?
Well,
have you not seen the Spock helmet? It's basically like a police helmet with a flashing light on the top, and it just says Spock across the front. I'm gonna have to find this for you right now. Hang on.
I was going to put it up right up there with the all-time worst sci-fi toys being the launch of the well-regarded Kenner Star Wars action figures, where they just gave you a box the first year and a promise that they were going to give you an action figure. So not as bad as the Spock helmet, but in a nearby neighborhood, in a nearby galaxy, perhaps. Oh, epic.
Spock helmet wasn't actually something that appeared in the show, but yeah. Yeah, that was the thing. So
that's awesome.
I would take the traffic flag lightsaber over the Spock helmet personally, but strokes for folks on that one. If you're talking to a guy who's got a 6-foot bear sitting behind him, and we're just not going to talk about it.
What did you mean?
The elephant in the room.
Quite literally. So,
Tasia, you're awfully quiet on this topic. What sort of geek stuff would float your boat in this realm?
Well, because I'm just wondering. They were very strategic with that little sneak peek. So I'm curious to know how it actually works when you're moving.
Yeah.
And pretending it's a lightsaber, because they were very still.
Yeah.
Like it was like, don't move, turn it on, And so I'm just curious. They're probably still working out the kinks, is my assumption.
Also, the hilt is kind of big. And this won't be the last time we say the word hilt, by the way. But it's the hilt is rather large.
I'm making a list of these words. Okay.
Thank you.
Hilt.
Sheath. Yeah.
We better add that to the Google Doc. So in real world space news, Tasia's hero is at it again, and it sounds like, of course, subject to, I believe, U.S. congressional approval, that, and this news, we actually missed this on our last week's episode, but it sounds like SpaceX has secured a $2.89 billion contract with NASA to get astronauts back to the moon. And they're saying it could happen as early as 2024. Now, Gray, you've been studying, you've gone back to school in the last year or two and studying all about this kind of stuff. How excited does this get you? Oh, did we lose Gray?
Maybe.
We've lost him. Well, someone do a Gray voice. Yeah, logging out. Hopefully he'll be able to join us. That's fine. We'll just carry on.
Do Gray.
So
now, Tristan, I have a question about this.
Okay.
Is this the same? I'm pretty sure it was SpaceX, but you could correct me on this. That's also going to be sending some regular people like me, like to Mars and like the moon and all this kind of stuff. So that's kind of gets me excited. I don't want to go to Mars. I would never. You couldn't pay me to, because you're gonna die. However, it's kind of cool, right? Because like he's definitely proved that they have the working technology to do this. So this is obviously way more attainable. Like when you think of just three short years, we're in 2021, right? What is time? When you think of just 3 short years, like it makes a lot of sense, I think. They've proven a way to do this cheaper. That's the thing.
I think one of the interesting things to that point, Tasia, is that one of the things that space travel has had a problem with is getting past the super expensive stage, getting past the early adopter stage, getting past it becoming the dream of people living on the moon, in the 60s or whatever. It's like, well, we'll all be living on the moon in 20 years. It's so we never got to that stage. We never even got close. So the fact that, SpaceX and others are trying to push the envelope there is just to sort of continue on your point, it is encouraging. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want to go up there if I wasn't experienced and ready for it. The other thing, just as a sort of sidestep, I'm not name dropping, but my brother actually climbed up Mount Everest. And one of the things that he said is there's a lot of people that shouldn't be climbing Mount Everest. There's a lot of people that they drag up there with oxygen, and there's a whole pay system. Not to go fully down that rabbit hole. There's all sorts of great things online. You can watch and read about that. But all I'm saying is I like that regular people can go, but I think there should also be some conditions and some barriers to fitness and things like that that are going to ensure everyone's survival.
Yeah, and speaking of Everest, I actually just watched the movie Everest this past weekend, and it just reminded me of the fact that there are a whole lot of frozen bodies up there that have yet to be recovered. Now, this announcement wasn't really about civilian passengers so much, and I know that Virgin Galactic has really promoted that, and even the Russian space program, they were flying people like Lance Bass from InSync up into space as a way to get some publicity and to help fund some of their programs, get some money from some rich people with money to spare. Now, you mentioned the fact that it's a lot more affordable, and one of the reasons why this is more affordable is because SpaceX, I keep wanting to say Tesla, but no, this is SpaceX, has really been working hard the last several years on the reusable rockets and even landing them. And that's been a game changer in driving the price down. Much to the chagrin of a lot of their competitors out there. You've got Lockheed Martin and others who will probably be putting some pressure on their local congresspeople whose election campaigns they fund and whatnot. So this isn't a sure bet. But Graham, you're back with us now, and you've been studying astronomy. Exactly what you said. You went back to school about a year and a half ago, and this is really your forte now. What do you think about this latest announcement that the U.S. could be getting, NASA could be getting people back on the moon in the next 3 or 4 years, thanks to SpaceX?
Pretty exciting, and I mean, obviously, like looking at this, a venture that's between public and private is something that I think is okay. It's great. I really love seeing kind of the pioneering stuff. Typically is being done by NASA, and when we're taking a look at SpaceX, it seems they're pioneering. They're following the road that was traveled, right? Like the work here has been done. They're just replicating the work that's been done. When we see things that NASA and CSA and other space agencies around the world that they're doing, they take the big ticket, big dollar risks that then basically pave the way for private industry to do this at a lower cost because it's been proven that it can be done. It's and that's not a bad thing. That's not an indictment of them. Looking at this and saying that we're going back to the moon, it's exciting for a number of different reasons, but not the least of which being that there's so much helium-3 on the moon. We're starting to look at this. Fusion is actually looking like it's going to be a reachable goal in the next little while. So if we're talking about things like the energy crisis, going back to the moon for tourism, awesome. Going back to the moon to stop climate change, yeah, I'll do that. So I'm stoked about it, to say the least. And so, no one's actually called me back. I've been calling about getting a ticket, and not apparently on anyone's VIP list. But that could change.
Give it time. Give it time.
I could probably send a bear as a gift.
I swear the bear just turned his head and looked at you. So the timing is interesting with this as well, because last week, or perhaps the week before, was the season finale of For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus. Have any of you three been watching this?
Season 2?
Season 2, sorry, yes.
Okay, I was going to say, I just finished season 1, episode 1.
Right.
Yes.
So.
And on your recommendation, so.
Well, you're welcome. I just wait till you get to the season finale of season 2. I mean, I'm sure season 3 will be great as well, but season 2 finale is like, oh, damn. And make sure you sit through the credits as well. So for the uninitiated, For All Mankind is executive produced by Ronald D. Moore, who was responsible for the reboot of Battlestar Galactica in the early 2000s, and more recently Outlander. He was involved back in the day as a writer, I believe, on was it Star Trek Next Generation, Graham?
Next Generation, then went on to Deep Space Nine. Was actually supposed to be picking up with Voyager, but when they wouldn't let him do with Voyager what he wanted to do, he went on to become Battlestar Galactica. Because when you throw a ship halfway across the galaxy by itself and it's suffering, they shouldn't be going after coffee in that near nebula. You should be worried that the giant robots are going to, or the killer robots are going to kill you. Just a small commentary on that one.
So
a little patty today. Might be the better.
So Will and Tasia, I would again, we're adding this to the list, along with Ted Lasso for those who haven't seen it, and along with Mythic Quest. This is another great offering from Apple TV Plus. They're going for quality, not quantity. Next time you buy a qualifying Apple product, you get a free year of Apple TV Plus, or you can just do the 1 week free trial and just binge all these series that we're talking about. But it's high quality stuff. It's alternate reality, alternate history. The Soviets get to the moon first in the 60s, and then we're in a different timeline. And it's interesting. Yeah, exactly. You have no idea what's going to happen. So there's real tension throughout the entire series. And they really... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if I can interject, just talking about products that you could purchase where you get a free year of Apple TV, pulled the trigger this week.
Oh.
My parents have been using the same iMac since 2011. 10 years for that iMac. Oof. And they have a brand new silver one, Tasia, on the way.
Not space gray.
And my mom might be watching. My mom might be watching right now, so I can't tell her what color of MacBook Air. Don't say anything, but it's a little surprise for Mother's Day. But there's a MacBook Air on the way that's coming tomorrow.
Great,
nice.
That's amazing. And you know what? I just realized that would amuse me to no end is that if you changed your name in the title bar to Space Gray. I can't think of anything more appropriate.
Yes.
There we go.
We have the technology.
Nice.
I'm with you, Gray. I pulled the trigger on something that a 6-month-old product, but was hoping to get it in place by today, but received it a little too late this afternoon that we'll be using hopefully for this live streams and other more general mobile computing use. The M1 MacBook Air, fully tricked out. Got the refurb, save $400 Canadian.
Nice.
That's great.
I did treat myself as well. This is the last time that you're going to see the 2017 iPad Pro.
Nice.
Oh my God.
OMG.
You didn't.
I did. I got the new Apple TV on the way I've got the new Apple remote on the way. It comes with a free Apple TV. It's a great bundle. It's just $250 for the remote, free Apple TV thrown in, plus a year of Apple TV included. Brilliant. But I went with the 11-inch because it's just. But did I splurge for the Magic Keyboard?
Yes.
Yes.
Goddamn right.
Well, we'll be looking forward to your reviews of all of those hot new Apple products. And we can't. What color did you get the iPad Pro in? Is it only space gray? Can you get in any other colors?
You can't get it in silver, but you better believe I went
right.
Space gray.
Space gray.
My MacBook Air, I went with the silver because I think the space grays should go for the Pro product. So I'm sticking to the traditional silver on that.
That's fair.
And also to make Tasia happy. Things that maybe aren't as happy making. Bill C10. We won't spend a lot of time on this because this can get a little wonky. And we're not, in short, there's a piece of Canadian federal government legislation, quite far-reaching, quite vague in some cases, that was ostensibly to try to get some Canadian content regulations on the large streaming carriers such as Netflix, having to play by the same rules as the regular TV broadcasters, some other provisions for getting musicians properly paid for their work. Along with that, however, there was some stuff about social media posts And would those fall under these new CRTC regulations? So that's the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission, for those not in Canada. Kind of like the FCC in the US. And initially, there was an exemption for regular folks' social media posts. And so they're like, yeah, nothing to worry here, because some people are like, free speech, free expression, what's happening here? But then they removed that exemption for some reason, and no one knows why. And I've just heard today that that exemption is going back in. This seems to be a moving target here. So I saw in a couple of places that exemptions going back in, because there were a lot of people, a lot of professors, a lot of civil liberties advocates, people like Michael Geist, whose article that we popped up there, who's been a long time commentator on all things net neutrality and free speech online and things like that. And people had some legitimate concerns there, but it was all getting kind of mixed in with these other, positive attributes. And Graham, I know you've been following Michael Geist for a while. Did you have any initial impressions on the initial C10 and what has happened since in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, the most interesting thing was really the Mr. Geist's analysis of Steven Gibault, his interview, talking about what was going on with this bill, and literally did not know what was going on in his own piece of legislation. It was incredibly frustrating, basically like ticking off all of the things that this thing doesn't cover, and then you take a look at it and it's like, no, but it does. Like, do you even show up for work? I have this odd moment every once in a while where I kind of look at it, and you take a look at the federal liberals in Canada, and you're like, are you just tired of being the government and you just kind of want to hand it off to somebody else now? Because it's legislation like this that just says you don't really listen to Canadians, you don't really know what's going on, and therefore we're just going to throw some things at the wall and hope they stick. It seems like it was almost legislation by committee, and really, really disappointed in how this turned out. There are things that, obviously we want to make sure that Canadian content providers are paid for the work that they do. When it comes down to it, there are things on social media that they're challenging and they're reprehensible at best sometimes. But these are private networks. And so therefore we turn to the private networks to police themselves. They haven't done a great job of it in the past, but it seems like as of January 6th this year, they started cotton onto the fact that maybe they had to. And so, they say the free market will dictate what it is that happens within these systems. It did a particularly poor job over the last 4 years, but it seems like a corner has been turned here. And I don't know that federal legislation is necessarily the choice. So looking at this, this gets like the Bill C10 gets a D- from me, in its previous form. But even then, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking this feels like a sophomoric effort at writing legislation. This is saying coming from somebody who's never been in government, but
yet.
But I still think that I probably could have done a better job on half a bottle of whiskey and 2 cigarettes. So
now, I wonder if it was maybe a trial balloon to put the fear of God into some of the large internet platforms out there. Especially the social ones like Facebook and Twitter, to say, if you don't keep your noses clean and enforce the rules that you have on your platforms, we're going to do it for you.
Yeah. I look at that, and I can only think that Mark Zuckerberg's like, oh look, something that's smaller than the size of California is going to be not on our network anymore. That's a real shame.
The other thing that it made me think of a little bit, and I agree with you guys. I mean, I think it's sort of good intentions, poor writing. But it reminds me a little bit of some of the things with Castle that I have dealt with quite a bit in some of my professional life.
And that's CASL.
Yeah, so it's the Canadian anti-spam legislation. Right. And one of the things that they did, so they brought it in, and there's many reasons why Castle should exist. So I'm not here ranting about Castle. But the part that did take people by surprise was they brought in Castle, and then a year later they said not only are organizations to be held accountable for each individual possible spam violation, individuals in that organization can be held accountable on June 1st. And people freaked out, and they kept on saying, no, it's going to happen. So that means they could, CRTC could, at the time, could have fined both the organization and the CEO and anyone else who was in a leadership position who had a knowledge of the communications system or that they brought it against. They canceled that because people freaked out because I mean, there's a whole legal issue there about holding individuals. So my point of bringing that up is that sometimes these things are floated out. Sometimes there's good intentions, but they don't think of the full ramifications of the implications and how far reaching that would be.
And I think, we try really hard not to get, we don't want to get like political in this show because everyone's got different political opinions. But one of the things I found a little egregious was that some of the government pushback on the criticism of Bill C-10 was like, oh, it's all these like conspiracy nuts, these tinfoil hat wearing so-and-sos, right? But when you think about it, like free speech is, in the last few years seems to be more the dominion of the right, but historically it's been the dominion of the left. This should, free speech and free expression should be issues that concern us all, because when you make the rules, you want to make sure that you would be happy to live by those rules if someone else was in power.
Yeah,
that's the key thing when it comes to legislation, right?
So my number one thing, again, not getting political, I'm not saying a right or left, but I think the thing is being fair and equal is being fair and equal to each side. It's not about one side going one way or the other. Now, having said that, there's wrongs that can be righted, and absolutely, but don't think that your side, if you pick a side, is immune from criticism or immune from censorship. The rules apply to both sides. They shouldn't be picking sides in any of this.
And so the key thing here is for the platforms, now that they've had the shot across the bow to enforce, to be very clear, and we've talked about this before, be very clear on their own policies and then enforce those policies. And then we won't need government overreach to come in and with, extra legislation, which should make people a little bit concerned. Speaking of being concerned, we mostly care about our privacy, right? And remember last year when the pandemic was starting up and Google and Apple pretty quickly they collaborated and came up with a way to enable some technology in the updated versions of their Android and iOS operating systems to allow third parties to build contact tracing apps, also known as exposure notification apps, for if you've been anywhere near someone else who had been registered as having contracted COVID-19. And they went through great pains to explain how this was all anonymous, and it was done by Bluetooth, the exchanging of anonymous keys between devices, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's just come out in the last week or so that, at least on the Google side, Apple is not, implicated in this so much, and Google is vociferously, trying to contradict what it's saying. But researchers are saying hundreds of pre-installed apps found on Android devices have had access to these logs, which could potentially be associated with your individual identity and your location, which kind of goes against the whole promises that Google and Apple were making back in the day and made a lot of people really scary. And even the government here in British Columbia, they didn't bother making an exposure notification app because they cited privacy concerns. Now, Graham, was the BC government right to not even play in this sandbox?
Well, it seems like they were for Android customers.
Shots fired.
Too bad, so sad. Is that the official response of Momentous?
Again, and the thing is, I looked at Apple's white paper on this. I didn't bother with Google's because. But
because that's Tasia's job.
It's Tasia's job. Somebody's gotta.
And we're gonna get her take in a sec.
Shade.
The thing is, and again, no offense to anybody that uses the Android operating system, but I have in the past and was not satisfied with what I found, so I left the ecosystem alone. And I don't purport to give advice to anybody who's on it. Usually is like, which phone should I buy? Are you on Android or iOS? Android, buy a Pixel. Leave me alone. That's it. I got nothing else for you. It's just you've made your choice. You've made your bed. Don't lie in it. But looking at this, it's just, Google does so many things right. They do so many things right. And then every once in a while, they're staring at the barn door going, did anybody see the horses? Anyone? Did you leave that? And this is exactly what we've got here. Now, looking at these two companies, they are both these massive monolithic entities, right? They both have brilliant security teams on both sides. How the hell did this happen? You had one job, one, to make sure that this file, this one in particular, was encrypted, sequestered, put into a secure enclave if you got it. But this thing of all the things, ends up with your ecosystem that we know is basically like Swiss cheese at the best of times. It's just I'm
But
not
this
even
is
angry.
also where,
I'm
like,
just disappointed.
I remember when these apps were starting to come out, and I was happy that the BC government didn't jump on it, because it seemed a little bit, and the pandemic obviously ramped everything up, but it seemed like a little bit, ready, fire, aim. It's like, look, I know we're in a pandemic, but these things, as Gray said, deal with some of the most important information. And this is what people are worried about, taking vaccines, that they'll be tracked. So, I mean, it is an obvious concern to people. So I think that they just rushed a little bit. In the case of something like the vaccines, they had already been working on coronavirus. Some people have been working on some of these apps, but to apply it in this instance and to push it forward so quickly was a little bit, misguided.
Yeah. I downloaded the Canadian federal government app pretty early on, but every time I opened it, it said, "Oh, not activated in your area," basically, which was disappointing. Tasia, in your neck of the woods, have there been these contact tracing or exposure notification apps in place in any of your nearby states? Have you tried it out?
Yeah, I set it up on my iPhone. In settings, you can allow for that. There were none in my local area, unfortunately, because the second it was available, and I was like, I'm making an IG reel on this. I'm gonna tell everybody how to be tracked. I'm in. And there's none in my local area. I think California and some other states, it probably works better. The thing with the Android platform that I would find interesting is, in general, I'm going to make a gross generalization. It's not as locked down as the Apple App Store. So a lot more gets through on an Android platform. I'm just going to really dumb it and leave it at that. So I'm not surprised at all. I actually laughed when he put the article up, because it's I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's happening on Apple's end too, and just nobody realizes or knows it. And you all know, my number one thing, we are all being tracked anyway. We walk around with small computers in our pockets.
Your body's covered in AirTags right now, right?
Of course. So if
I got
anybody's
a
so concerned about all this,
I'm not
it's
tracked anymore.
We're walking around with mini computers. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but the mini computer doesn't always have to be reporting back to somebody else as to where it is or what it's doing, right?
Especially,
the GPS is accessed for me, not for anybody else. And I've now got a switch on here that says, "Do not tell other apps what my apps are doing." Right? They're going through and they're locking this down. So the idea that it's just happening anyway, I kind of look at it and I'm like, but no, it doesn't have to.
But that's
even
point.
Google is actually coming out with third-party cookies. They're killing third-party cookies in Chrome. It's important to people over there.
But that's my point, is as the user, we think we have control over this, and we click a button that says, no, don't track, or no, don't send me, Facebook, don't watch me where I go on my phone, because I don't want these ads targeted to me. You are trusting at the end of the day, you are trusting a company who owes you nothing, really.
Yeah.
That they're in it to make money, and you are trusting your information with them and what they do with that info and how they keep that info secure. That's my point, is so we can all think we're doing everything right. But
side tangent here. Those tech lists of at the end of the year about products that are coming out, or what's going to be hot next year. And I remember, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, one of the trends for the following year was going to be those black box phones, the ones where you could more selectively block communications. Whatever happened to that? Sorry, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. It just made me think, was that just nah, you can't do much with those things. That was one of the things with BlackBerry. Yeah, but that was one of the
Who makes calls on this? Nobody wants this to just do what it's supposed to do. We want it for all the other things.
Have you guys
one
not
of
seen
the-
why.
have you not seen the Medita Pure? The Medita
No.
Pure? No, it's basically it's an e-ink phone that it texts. I think it's got maps on it, maybe, but it looks like the old candy bar style phone, and it does texting. It does phone calls. I think it has like a 9-number memory bank, something like that. I don't know. The height of T9 text input technology.
Beautiful.
So they did a Kickstarter. I think those things are going to actually go for like $300-ish. So it's still like it's bought outright, but it's a premium phone that does jack all.
Yeah, premium phone
Right.
that does not much.
To answer your question, I don't know anyone that's bought one.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the article saying something like, in this global community, people don't want to have to go between countries if they're, high-powered business people, and the different access that different servers are going to give them around the world, and blah, 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 blah. And then I haven't heard anything about it in years. So it's interesting, that phone that you're talking about, Gray.
So there are layers to issues like that, like this. To Tasia's point, there was an option on devices a number of years ago that was a do not track feature in web browsers that would basically tell websites, look, don't track me. But the problem is that websites didn't have to obey that. So what was happening is that websites were using that selection as yet another indicator to make a digital fingerprint of your identity. So if you actually had that enabled, it was one more thing that helped identify you as an individual, and they just ignored it altogether. So we have to do all the things that we can in good faith to protect our privacy if it matters to us. Whether or not the other players involved are keeping up their end of the bargain is another story. And the larger the player, the more responsibility they have, and the more they have to lose from a PR disaster by not following the rules that they set. So that's why we get back to the well, new versions. Apple with IDFA, and we talked about last week with iOS 14.5, really laying the hammer down to prevent cross-site tracking by the dozens of different ad networks out there. So one website the website that this article was from that we featured is called The Markup. And if you're interested in issues like that, they are doing some really great investigative journalism when it comes to issues like privacy, security, net neutrality, and others. And they are holding big tech's feet to the fire.
Well, Tristan, this is important because the biggest thing, and I've worked for one of these companies that will go nameless, and there's a lot like them, that at the end of the day, what is the biggest issue is there's human people running the machine, and the human people have access to all the information in the machine. And I just want everybody to keep that in mind. And as much as we wish everybody's a good person and sensitive with your information, that's not always the case.
I will point out one thing.
So
tinfoil is actually not a good insulator and does actually increase the penetration of RF frequencies. So
joke's on you, kids.
Yeah.
So speaking of companies that shall not be named, Twitter.
Yes, hello?
Twitter Spaces, which they have been testing for the last several months, their response to Clubhouse, our favorite whipping boy here. And they've been testing it for months and months, live audio conversations on Twitter, because everyone has to do all the features that everyone else is doing. Facebook launched theirs, or they announced theirs a few weeks ago. Theirs was called Hotline, which reminded me of Hotline Server back in the 90s. Good way to exchange files across Macs on the web.
I thought you were going to say Hotline Bling.
That's so is this something that we need? Have any of you bothered to try out Twitter Spaces and basically have Clubhouse but on Twitter? The advantage here being that you don't have to create another social graph. You don't have to let another app like Clubhouse scan all your contacts. You already have your existing contacts on Twitter that you may have accumulated over the last decade or more. Is this something we need in the world?
I actually like Twitter Spaces. And this is coming from the person who did the video on Clubhouse. And like, y'all know I have not been on Clubhouse in literal months. So that fizzled pretty quick for me. It was so overwhelming and just the notifications were so irritating, and the growth was too big too fast for me. And so it was a lot of entrepreneurs in there just trying to pitch their thing, or faux experts saying they're experts in thing, and like there's no way to back anybody's credentials or actually know who these people are. What I like about Twitter Spaces is one of the points you touched on, that I already have the app, so it's there for me. It's not a super crowded space yet, so there's not an overwhelming amount of notifications coming through for when there are spaces happening. And what I've noticed is it's easier to be able to verify somebody, because like back in the day when Twitter was really only having the verification check mark for like to verify this is this real celebrity or person or whatever, it's kind of easier to say, oh, like this person is this expert in this. I have a quicker way to look into them really than who is this person on Clubhouse claiming they know something. So like I've actually popped into a couple spaces that Susie Orman has put on. I've been like cooking dinner and I was like, oh, she's holding a space. And I liked it. It's really, it's basically the exact same thing. It's a mirror image, but it was just more casual for me. And it's just less stress, and it's a slower pace, and I like it. So now we get it now. So anybody that has 600 or more followers on Twitter has access to it. So I dug into it today. It's not in the most intuitive spot, I will say that. You kind of have to, like, you go into like as if you were going to put like a little story, and then you kind of have to scroll through to get to the spaces. However, it's cool, and I think that we should all try it.
I concur.
Well,
can I give you guys the good news? Check this out. Boom.
Yes.
604 in Vancouver.
I can't even see. It's so tiny.
I've got 604 followers.
Oh, yay! Nice.
He's eligible. That's great. So basically it means like you can, the 600 to clarify means you can host a space. Yes. Anybody that doesn't have 600, you can join spaces that you see going on, like that doesn't affect it, but to host your own space, and I think you can have up to 10 hosts or something like that, or yeah. And so then it works very similar to Clubhouse in that way. We could bring people up to speak, send them back down. I think we should do it.
You may speak. You must be silent.
Well, to your point, Tasia, if there's one thing that Twitter is known for is a nice, slow, easygoing pace. It's interesting. One of the comments they made here says, Spaces encourages and unlocks real, open conversations on Twitter with the authenticity and nuance, depth, and power only the human voice can bring. Well, again, we could probably use a little nuance on Twitter and a lot of other social platforms. So maybe this is exactly what Twitter needs. Because a lot of social media platforms, especially when it's text only, have a tendency to dehumanize people. And it's just an avatar on a screen, and you can be as nasty as you want, forgetting that there's a human being on the other end of that. So when you're hearing people's voices, maybe that will make people check themselves a little bit and be able to engage in a different way rather than just their hot takes.
Exactly. And they started this like with, you can do little voice notes on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have ever done them, but you can attach them to your tweet or just have that be the tweet. And that was kind of their soft launch into how to have a different connection with your followers so they could hear the person behind the tweets. The other interesting thing about Spaces, and they will tell you right there when you like agree to the terms, that they hold a recording of the audio for a certain period of time. They weren't specific. They said a certain period of time, because if you need to report any misgivings or something that might happen, they want to be able to go back to that easily. So they've done a really smart thing in figuring out all the whoopsies that Clubhouse went through and just going, okay, we'll dev around that. Perfect. And so it's just like they were able to use it as a model of both the good and the bad and go, oh, thanks guys, you did the heavy lifting, here this is.
And that's exactly like my concern is like something like Twitter. I think I've Tristan, I may have had a conversation with you about this in the past. I'm on Twitter. I like Twitter. I don't engage in a lot of conversations for the exact point of the sort of faceless thing. A lot of times when I have gotten involved in conversations, you know, what's the internet law about there's so many things before someone else calls someone Hitler or something like that.
Godwin's law. Yeah.
Godwin's law. But so there's so far before either that happens or someone gets blocked and there's a hissy fight. So I just find, for me, I think, you know, adding a voice behind it, to your point, Tasia, would add a lot. I find interactions on Instagram pretty good. Like I've had a number of interactions and people are very nice. And it just sort of clued in. Maybe it's because your face is behind it, as opposed to something like Twitter, where it's just a nameless avatar. And half the people have, you know, crazy names like, you know, Pussy Willow 47 or something like that. It's just random real name. Anyways, so not my name, but
We're coming for you.
Coming for you. So, you know, there's all these kind of random names out there, and you don't have to put your name behind it or put your face behind it.
And Pussy Willow 47, is that a person with a cartoon furry? I mean, you see them a lot.
Yeah, I actually changed the number, but
okay.
Yeah, anyways.
Give or take 22.
There's more than 47. That's all I'm going to say. I didn't want to say the number, but I think you can guess what the number was.
You were doing so well.
Poor Pussy Willow 47. I mean, come on.
Getting shade thrown on them.
Yeah, to be fair, you can choose whatever name or use whatever avatar you want on Instagram as well, but it just seems to generally have a bit of a different culture. And, you know, we go back to Google in 2011 with Google Plus. They were trying really hard to get people to use their real names, just like Facebook's been doing, but Google made it a policy, and then they relented a little bit because there is some value to anonymity and pseudonymity online. But Google was saying, you know, that's cool, but not here. Here we just want real, authentic people. And the Google Plus experiment kind of flopped at the end of the day. So yeah, I think because it was kind of late in the game, they were trying to be all things to all people. They were trying to replace Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And they, I think, rightfully, you know, gave up on it. But it's funny, though, because there are some people that even though if they use their real name and their real photo, there's some shameless people out there. They don't care.
Yeah.
So,
well, the other thing is a guy that I know, and I have an account that I use for my music, so it is an alias, but I still, like you said, it's like a cultural thing. I just feel like the real conversations. But the other thing is that one of the guys that I do follow and talk to quite a bit, and he's nice to me, he's pretty brash about saying things, and he got banned for 3 days because he just said somebody's music was crap, and it didn't seem all that bad to me, and he got banned for 3 days. And in some ways, it's not good, but in some ways, it's good. Someone's actually monitoring this stuff. Yeah. It wasn't that bad, but it was slightly offside.
There is an automated system, though, because I got flagged for 12 hours for talking about the myth of the phoenix, like rising from the ashes. And somehow that got flagged for self-harm.
Oh.
I kid you not.
Wow.
I know, I appealed it, and the automated system looked at it immediately. I think it did put through a person, and so it canceled the 12-hour ban, but it was just for the...
The person I know legit said something, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, on Twitter, it would have been like, whatever.
So apropos of nothing, there's another story that caught my attention this week, and it had to do with a little bit of a pissing match between, you know, these giant companies, actually one giant company and one smaller company, and it was Roku and Google. And what was basically happening is Roku, as you may know, sells a number of streaming devices, sticks and boxes and whatnot for watching Netflix and Prime Video and Apple TV, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess it came time to renegotiate a contract between YouTube and Roku. And YouTube, or Google, the parent company, started making all sorts of demands of Roku, which then Roku's like, what? And they went public in it, which some people think Google's like, why? You don't negotiate in public. They're clutching their pearls. But when you hear about some of the demands that Google was allegedly making, things like they wanted the search results from their platforms to come ahead of anyone else's search results. If you're doing a general search through Roku, things like that. And then Roku eventually said, you know what? We're just going to not let anyone download the YouTube app or the YouTube TV app and until we get this sorted out, because you're being a bully. So they pulled the one trump card that they had, and now anyone who already has the app installed on the Roku device, they're fine. That will still work. But any person who buys a new Roku app, they will not be able to install the they buy Roku device, they will not be able to install the YouTube apps on there. Now that could end up hurting Roku, because if people buy the device and it's like basically broken if you can't run YouTube on there. So this is still a story in development. But how do you feel? How do you guys feel about stuff like this? Graham, you've got a hand up.
Yeah. Point of order. This is not the YouTube app.
It's YouTube TV.
YouTube, yeah. So this is aimed at cord cutters. Right. And so when you take a look at all of these other services, this is just one in the many of the pantheon of cord cutting services. And quite frankly, it's not the best of the bunch. Right. Like there are plenty of channels. Like if YouTube Premium was gone, I would be concerned. I'm a YouTube Premium subscriber, and if I did not have access to that app on my streaming center of choice, I'd be a little miffed. I'd having to AirPlay or whatnot to it, I wouldn't be happy. YouTube TV. I guess I'll take this up with the rest of the trash. Like,
especially since they let go Cobra Kai and Netflix picked it up, right?
Yeah. and so the negotiating tactics here are just like they feel like a dumb man's idea of what Machiavelli would do. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Our search results have to come first. Plus, you have to use these codecs, which we don't even use in Chromecast. Get out. The door is there. Just don't let it hit you on the way through. And I almost wonder, are these two different divisions inside of YouTube? Because the way that YouTube, they want to be everywhere, right? Like, let's just be there. We'll make the money, and that's it. And that to me makes sense. Be in more places, make more cash. And somehow it feels like maybe there's this little fiefdom in YouTube TV where there's one guy behind a desk going, get that Roku. Come on.
And given the relative popularity of YouTube TV, maybe it feels like they're overplaying their hand a little bit.
A little.
Now, if it was the YouTube app and Roku decided to yank that from the Roku App Store, that would be a different story. But again, that could be shooting themselves in the foot.
I feel like YouTube TV showed up with "Don't you know who I am?" And we're like, actually, we don't. You look like that guy over there, but you're not him. Are you like Bizarro YouTube?
Speaking of app downloads falling off a cliff, one thing I forgot to mention in our last story was the Clubhouse app downloads have fallen off a cliff, and I'm sure that will make Tasia happy.
She called it, way back when. She called it.
So anyway, this is just another example of these little spats between these large companies, and it just ends up hurting consumers in the long run. So hopefully they'll be able to figure this out quickly. Maybe YouTube TV will realize maybe they're not as big a deal as they think they are. However, if they start pulling the heavy and say, well, you know what, we will just disable the YouTube app on Roku devices. How do you feel about that? I mean, it could get ugly if they wanted to pull the nuclear option.
That feels anti-competitive, and that's they're already in a lot of people's sites. It's just, you know what, keep your head down, make the money. There's no reason to press this. This just seems, this is like Epic and Apple right now. It's just like, why are you doing this? You were making plenty of money to begin with. This just seems silly.
And regular folks don't have a lot of patience for multi-billion-dollar corporations fighting amongst themselves. It's like, just go figure it out. Just call us when you're done. Speaking of Apple, Tasia had found a little story. Now, we don't usually get into the rumor territory here. We generally focus on hard news. However, this is intriguing. It's something that's been kind of floated around a little bit. Apple has continued to add features in generation after generation of Apple Watch, the most recent in the Apple Watch 6 being the blood oxygen monitoring. Now, the holy grail for some folks has been blood sugar monitoring, which traditionally it was quite invasive, people having to prick themselves and stick into a little sensor machine and whatnot. Tasia, what's going on here? What's the story with the Apple Watch?
So the reason I included this little rumor is because this isn't the first time this has been rumored. So I feel like it's definitely going to happen at some point. The newest rumor is it's coming in the next iteration of Apple Watch, which is the 7, the Series 7. We don't know about that, right? I mean, it's really hard to say. Essentially, this UK-based company has developed, they claim, a technology that uses the light sensors that we already have on the back of our watches that are doing some of these other testing metrics. And they're going to be able to test the levels on the surface of your skin in order to decipher your blood sugar levels and if they're at a safe level or not for diabetics. So this could be huge because right now, Apple Watch really, if you're diabetic, it only works with like third-party apps and like devices and things like that. So this could be, I mean, giant, because like, I think anything in the tech space that's working towards like our overall health and wellness and making things more accessible and making things easier, I'm here for it. So that's why I wanted to include the rumor, because it excites me.
I think that's really exciting. A little bit of sharing here. My mother actually is diabetic, and one thing that changed her life, I think it's called like Freestyle Libre or something. And this is a revolution, but this actually is like connected to your body all the time. But at least you don't have to do finger pricks. But this system kept her blood sugar so well in check because it's monitoring you fairly often. She lost 50 pounds in the last 9 months.
Wow.
Because of this thing. So it's changed her life. I can only imagine if it was less invasive, because as good as that is, it's still like connected to you, right? Like it's a little janky and it scares me a little bit, but she's fine with it. And she's doing a lot better as a result just of that shift from picking your finger and like, you know, practically like leeches now, it looks like, if the Apple Watch is coming out with this. So like you said, just a huge revolution.
And this supplier, Rockley, in whose SEC filings have revealed some of these details, they've been working on other technologies such as blood pressure tracking, which could help you with issues like monitoring stress and alcohol levels and things like that too. So it sounds like they've been doing some innovative stuff, and you know, it looks like Apple is one of their customers. So whether it's going to be, some of these features are going to be in the Series 7 this fall, or maybe the Series 8 next year, one way or the other, it looks like Will's mom might be getting an Apple Watch from Santa sometime soon.
May have to look into it.
Another Tasia special here is our token Italian in the group.
Hey, what's the matter for you? What do you mean?
You found this interesting story on the Roman Colosseum getting a new floor. For anyone who has seen pictures of the Colosseum in Rome, in the middle where you think the floor would be, all you see all these at the tops of these pillars that would be supporting the floor, because the original floor has long since decayed. So what's this new project about, Tasia?
Yeah, so it's really kind of twofold or trifold, or it's multi-use. But basically, what's happening here is they've made they've contracted a company from Milan that has made a sustainable wood product that is going to be the entire new floor, almost 33,000 square feet. So if you guys are picturing this vastness of this Colosseum, because until now, as tourists, you can really only access from kind of like either end, and it's just almost like a little walkout, and like then you can't go into the center of the Colosseum, or really most of what will be that floor. So the first reason they wanted to do this was to give the experience to the tourist of, what that view and that vastness would have been if you were one of those gladiators fighting, in the horrific, I can't even call them battles, but like horrific stuff that went down in the Colosseum. But they want to give tourists that kind of like front row view. However, it also is doing a double duty with the technology that they've kind of deployed in this, which is it's obviously going to be easily detractable in case you need to pull it back. It's going to slant, which will allow for really important ventilation underneath, because those pillar structures that you see, those are the original structures that are left, but that entire basement under there that's between those pillars that would have held up the floor, that's all. You can still go down and tour in there, and that was all usable space back in the day. So they stored all the animals there. The fighters would be there before they, took to the stage, and
It was
you
like the
can even
green room,
see,
basically.
yeah, it was the green room. I mean, a horrific one.
Green room of
Terrible,
horrors.
terrible conditions. But they still have, the rope and pulley systems that would, bring the lion up to fight. And anyway, but so they want to keep the ventilation going under there. It's also going to allow for some climate control, which is important too, because it can get pretty humid there. And so they want to try to preserve these structures. And then also they're going to have like a rain catchment system. So basically it'll like capture the rain and it can like funnel it out to another area there, so that right now when it rains, I mean, everything can just kind of sit and be soggy. And when you're talking about structures this old, you really want to preserve them, and you don't want to be losing the foundation of the Colosseum. So it's really, really cool. I'm like so jazzed to eventually travel back to Italy again, and I want to go stand in the middle of the Colosseum. Who's with me? We taking Momentous on the road?
I have one requirement, is that the tour guide must be Russell Crowe.
Oh, yes.
Are you not entertained?
Now, this is a last minute addition here, and forgive me, Graham, but I'm adding it to the doc. Speaking of Russell Crowe, I watched upon a recommendation from my sister, one of my sisters, this past weekend, a documentary on Netflix called The Last Blockbuster.
Oh, Tasia was recommending it too a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but I ignored her.
Yeah. Oh, what's the matter with you?
What's the matter with you?
Yeah, so we should watch this, though, is what you're saying.
Well, because a certain piece of Russell Crowe's apparel from Gladiator makes a cameo appearance. Oh, kind of. I mean, it doesn't. It's sort of it's alluded to. Let's put it that way. Tasia, you want to refresh us on The Last Blockbuster, since we got to give credit where credit's due here.
Yes, it's a great little show that really is like a little documentary on the last blockbuster that exists, or does it? I'm not going to give it away. Does it still exist? You'll have to watch to find out.
In Bend, Oregon.
In Bend, Oregon, and they take us through the history of the rise and eventual fall of this giant. And you'd be surprised with what the downfall actually was, because a lot of people think it was the advent of Netflix and streaming, but it wasn't. Because y'all remember when Netflix first came out? It was
DVDs by mail.
It was not streaming. So, people forget kind of what that was. And so people think, well, that was what took them out, because this was just, so much easier. I know it would just show up in the mail. That's not what took them out.
Where's
and you'll have to watch to see. Yeah, exactly. You'll have to watch to see.
My first Netflix experience, I rented Contact. And I also got sent a copy of a little small art film called Hostel. That was some therapy.
So real-time update. I just got a text from a friend exclaiming, "Doge! Dogecoin's been on a tear."
Yeah.
I think did it crest 50 cents yet? It's pretty close. It was 47 earlier today.
Yeah, I think it's close. Yeah.
We talked about Dogecoin a couple weeks ago. Anyhow, yeah. So Last Blockbuster, I definitely recommend it. Gray, if you guys haven't seen it yet, check it out. It plays a little bit like a Paul Harvey story. It's like, now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
I do have to say that I have seen it. I loved it. And I agree with Tasia. It's very interesting to see them fully go through the downfall. But the other thing I found super interesting, because all of us have worked in tech companies or tech retail as well, and to see the mechanics behind what the video industry was and how Blockbuster came even into power and killing some of the mom and pops and all that kind of dynamic playing that into the format wars with beta versus VHS, HD DVD versus Blu-ray, all that stuff. It's just so fascinating, that history of media and formats.
Yeah. All right, I'm in.
I still miss physical media.
Me too.
But non-physical media, quick NFT update. Disaster Girl sold an NFT and made.
Oh, right. Yeah.
How much did she make off of the selling of the meme or NFT, Tasia?
I think it was $500,000.
500,000 clams.
US.
And this is the ongoing trend that we were talking about previously of people who've been the subject of memes now finally getting their payday, which I think is brilliant. Just waiting. Hopefully, hopefully Star Wars Kid's going to get in on the action.
And Ghislaine Rassa.
Yeah. How about Scumbag Steve? He's got to get in there.
Techno Viking.
All the memes. But
I just like it in the way that they can kind of take back control a little bit. You know what I mean? Because like it seems so cool, you know, when these memes were going viral and oh, how cool, and this is the person behind this meme. But like, really, what money did they make from that? That 15 minutes of fame, they probably didn't see much from that. And a lot of them, because these memes are older and were before, you know, we could try to light stuff up on social, like, and go off a momentum of a meme, really, they weren't getting a payday. So I love this. I think she's brilliant. She's like in school and she's going to pay for her school and then donate a bunch of money to charity because she's a badass. Nice. She's amazing. And this was a cool way for her to just take back control of her image. That's her. Yep. She should get paid.
And to that point, I mean, some of these people, I mean, she was underage, she was young, but also some people, it's not even their photo. The person in the photo didn't post the photo or make the meme, and they've lost no control. So totally to your point, this is a nice sort of feel-good story about someone taking something that maybe they didn't have control over and take control of it.
Yeah, she was 4 when the photo was originally taken, and it was actually entered by her father into an online photo contest. But as often happens with these things, they often take on a life of their own, and you know, that look is definitely one for the books. And the fact she's 21 now, in university, like Tasia said, going to school and donating a bunch of charity, it's the kind of feel-good story that we all need right now. So we should wrap up here, but before we do, Tasia, what do you got for us this week on the YouTubes?
Well, I know you've been waiting with bated breath, TJ, and this was my third and final, so far, installment of the Google Travel Tips series. I have to tell you guys, as you guys know, this wasn't, of course, that well received because besides people in the US who've been fully vaccinated, not many other people are traveling. And so this third video is on how to find cheap flights with Google Flights. And it kind of started off a little flat like the other two. And then on Saturday, it went bing and just spiked to become one of my, like in this short time frame, one of my most popular videos in under a week. And I was trying to figure out, well, how the heck did this happen? Because YouTube is so random sometimes. And I realized that on Saturday, the EU announced that they would soon be opening up travel to vaccinated Americans. And so I went back into my analytics on YouTube and was like, yep, mostly US people were watching this video. So we were all frantically like, I need to find cheap flights. Give me the cheap flights. I gotta get out of here.
How do I do this?
Right into my veins.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's there if you should want to watch it as your little travel inspo for when we all start traveling again. There's a couple other little tidbits in there too. You know, I like to throw in a little tidbits not many people know into these videos. So check it out.
So we can find Tasia's videos at youtube.com/Tasia Custodi. And if you want to learn more about Momentous, you can visit our website, momentus.tv, facebook.com/MomentousTV. For some reason, I move my arms when I say these things. Twitter.com/MomentousTV, Instagram.com/Momentus.tv, and all the good socials. Oh, look at that. Follow us on Twitter. Good stuff. Oh, so yeah. Tuesday night. Remember, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. This is our second. It's in the books. We moved from Sunday, and second Tuesday in the books. We will see you next Tuesday.